I never thought I'd have to defend my own property from a power-hungry HOA president, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. The security cameras I'd installed after purchasing my lakefront property captured exactly what I needed to expose Karen Thompson for who she really was, a manipulative, entitled woman who believed rules applied to everyone but herself. My name is Xander Young, but most people call me Xander. After 15 years of military service and 2 tours overseas, I'd saved enough to buy my dream home, a modest 3-bedroom cottage with private beach access on Lake Clearwater. The property wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and that small stretch of shoreline represented everything I'd worked for. I'd been living peacefully for about 6 months when the trouble started. It was a warm Saturday morning in May when the aggressive knocking began. "Coming!" I called, setting down my coffee mug and heading to the front door. When I opened it, I found a woman with a perfectly styled blonde bob and an expression that suggested she just smelled something unpleasant. "Mr. Young?" she asked, not waiting for confirmation. "I'm Karen Thompson, president of the Clearwater Estates Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your beach access." I blinked, caught off guard. "Good morning to you too. What about my beach access?" Karen's artificially whitened smile didn't reach her eyes. "There seems to be some confusion. The beach attached to your property is meant for community use. I've received complaints that you've been preventing residents from accessing it." This was news to me. "I'm sorry, but that's incorrect. According to my deed and the property survey, the beach is part of my private property." Karen's smile tightened. "Well, that's simply not how things work around here. The previous owner allowed community access as a courtesy. The previous owner could do what they wanted, but I purchased this property with the understanding that the beach was private." Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Young, we pride ourselves on being a community that shares amenities. Perhaps you're not familiar with how things operate in Clearwater Estates, but—" I cut her off as politely as I could. "I'm familiar with my property rights, Ms. Thompson. I have the deed and survey that clearly show the beach is part of my property." "I see." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, I think you'll find that fighting the HOA on this matter won't be in your best interest. We have ways of making things difficult for uncooperative homeowners." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on my walkway. I closed the door, unsettled by the encounter. I hadn't even known my property was part of an HOA when I purchased it. My real estate agent, Gabriella Winters, had assured me there wasn't one. Something didn't add up. I called Gabriella immediately. "Xander, how's lakefront living treating you?" Gabriella answered cheerfully. "Not great at the moment. I just had a visit from someone claiming to be the president of an HOA I didn't know existed." There was a pause on the line. "That's impossible. Your property isn't part of any HOA. I made absolutely sure of that before you purchased. You specifically said no HOAs, and I honored that request." "Well, Karen Thompson seems to think differently. She's demanding access to my beach for the entire community." "Karen Thompson?" Gabriella's voice changed. "Tall, blonde, drives a white Mercedes SUV?" "That's the one. She's been trying to expand the Clearwater Estates HOA territory for years. Your property is adjacent to their community but definitely not part of it. She's bluffing, Xander." Relief washed over me. "So I can just ignore her?" "I wouldn't ignore her. She's persistent and has connections with the town council. But stand your ground. I'll email you copies of all your documentation again, just to have on hand." I thanked her and hung up, feeling better but still uneasy. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The next day, I found a formal letter in my mailbox, printed on official-looking Clearwater Estates HOA letterhead. It stated that I was in violation of community guidelines by restricting access to communal beach property, and demanded I remove any barriers or signage within 7 days or face daily fines of $100. I immediately called the county records office and confirmed what I already knew: my property was not part of any HOA. The beach was mine, legally and fully. Armed with this confirmation, I installed security cameras around my property and particularly facing the beach access points. If Karen was going to escalate this situation, I wanted evidence. 3 days later, I returned home from grocery shopping to find about a dozen people on my beach, setting up umbrellas and coolers as if it were a public park. I approached a couple sitting on a blanket near the water's edge. "Excuse me, but this is private property." The man looked up, shielding his eyes from the sun. "No, it's not. The HOA sent a community email saying this beach is open to all Clearwater residents." "I'm afraid you've been misinformed," I said, trying to remain calm. "I own this property, including this beach. I'm going to have to ask everyone to pack up and leave." Some people started gathering their things, looking confused, but others seemed defiant. A woman with a small child spoke up. "Karen said you're just being difficult and that you can't legally keep us off the beach. She said the HOA has documentation proving it's community property." "That's simply not true," I replied. "I have the deed and property survey that prove otherwise." "I'm sorry you were misled, but this is private property." Eventually, most people left, albeit reluctantly. As the last family was packing up, a white Mercedes SUV pulled into my driveway. Karen stepped out, accompanied by a man in a polo shirt with the Clearwater Estates logo. "Mr. Young," she called out, marching toward me. "What do you think you're doing?" "Protecting my private property," I responded evenly. "This is unacceptable," she snapped. "This is community property, and you know it." "It's not, and I think you know that," I countered. "My property isn't even part of your HOA." The man beside her stepped forward. "I'm Doug Peterson, Vice President of the HOA. Perhaps we can discuss this civilly?" "There's nothing to discuss," I said firmly. "I've confirmed with county records that my property is not part of your HOA. The beach is private, and I'd appreciate if you'd stop telling people otherwise." Karen's face flushed with anger. "We have historical precedent. The previous owner allowed access. That was their choice, not a legal obligation," I explained. "And it's not my choice." "You'll regret this," Karen hissed. "No one defies the HOA and gets away with it." As they turned to leave, Doug looked back at me with an expression that seemed almost apologetic. That night, I reviewed the security footage from the past few days and noticed something strange. Karen had been on my property multiple times when I wasn't home, sometimes measuring the beach area, other times taking photos. In one clip, she was clearly removing the small, private property signs I had placed at the beach entry points. The following morning, I decided to place larger, more permanent, "No trespassing" signs and installed a gate at the main beach access point from my backyard. I also printed copies of my property deed and survey to keep on hand. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I found Doug Peterson standing there alone, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Young, I wanted to speak with you privately," he said, glancing over his shoulder as if worried someone might see him. "I think you should know what's really going on with Karen." I invited him in, curious. "I'm listening." Once seated in my living room, Doug sighed heavily. "Karen doesn't actually believe your beach is community property. She knows it's not. Then why is she doing this? Clearwater Estates is trying to attract new high-end homebuyers, and Karen's been promising beach access as a selling point. When you moved in and actually enforced your property rights, it created a problem for her marketing strategy." I was stunned. "She's lying to potential buyers about access to my property?" Doug nodded. "There's more. The HOA collects fees specifically for beach maintenance and access. If homeowners realize they don't actually have legal beach access, they'll question where that money's been going." "Where has it been going?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "Karen controls the accounts. The board rarely sees detailed financial reports." Doug looked down at his hands. "I've been suspicious for a while, but I can't prove anything." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because what she's doing to you isn't right," he said simply. "And I think it might be illegal." She's talking about having the HOA lawyer file an easement claim against your property based on historical use. That won't hold up, I said confidently, but I felt a twinge of worry. Maybe not, but fighting it could cost you thousands in legal fees. That's her real strategy. Make it so expensive for you to fight that you give in. After Doug left, I called a lawyer who specialized in property law. She confirmed that an easement claim would likely fail but agreed it could be costly to defend against. She also expressed concern about Karen's unauthorized entry onto my property and removal of my signs. That's trespassing and possibly theft, my lawyer, Grace Mendoza, explained. If you have evidence, you should file a police report. The next day, I compiled the security footage and went to the local police station. Officer James Wilson reviewed the footage with me. She's clearly trespassing, he agreed. And removing your signs is illegal. We can issue her a warning, but if you want to press charges, you'll need to file a formal complaint. I hesitated, not wanting to escalate the situation further, but decided a warning might be enough to make Karen back off. It wasn't. 2 days later, I returned home from work to find my gate damaged and about 20 people on my beach. A large banner had been hung between 2 trees. Clearwater Estates Community Beach Party. In the center of it all stood Karen, directing people where to set up. When she spotted me, she smiled triumphantly and waved. I approached her, keeping my temper in check. This needs to end now. You're trespassing on private property. It's a community event approved by the HOA. She responded loudly, clearly performing for the crowd. We have every right to be here. You don't, and you know it, I said quietly. The police have already warned you about trespassing. Don't make me call them again. Karen laughed dismissively. Go ahead. By the time they arrive, we'll have had our event. And do you really want to be known as the man who had families with children removed from the beach? She had orchestrated this perfectly, using innocent families as shields for her illegal activities. Some of the parents nearby were watching our exchange, looking confused and concerned. You have 30 minutes to end this event and clear my property, I said firmly. After that, I'm calling the police and pressing charges against you personally. Karen's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. You're making a big mistake, Mr. Young. The HOA has resources you can't imagine. I turned and walked back to my house, immediately calling Officer Wilson to report the trespassing in progress. Then I called Grace Mendoza, who advised me to document everything but avoid any physical confrontation. Within 20 minutes, most families had packed up and left, apparently uncomfortable once they realized there was a genuine property dispute. By the time Officer Wilson arrived, only Karen and a few HOA board members remained. Officer Wilson approached Karen. Ms. Thompson, we've already discussed this. You're trespassing on private property. This is ridiculous, Karen protested. This beach has always been for community use. That's not what county records show, Officer Wilson replied calmly. Mr. Young has provided documentation proving his ownership. You need to leave now, or I'll have to escort you off the property. Karen glared at me. This isn't over, she said before stalking away, her remaining supporters trailing behind her. Over the next week, things escalated dramatically. My mailbox was vandalized. My car was keyed in the grocery store parking lot. Though I couldn't prove Karen was responsible, the timing seemed suspicious. Then came the notices. Official-looking letters claiming violations of HOA rules that didn't apply to my property. Citations for unapproved landscaping, improper fence installation, and unauthorized signage, each carrying fines that accumulated daily. I took these to Grace, who sent a cease and desist letter to Karen and the HOA board. 2 days later, I received a response from the HOA's lawyer threatening to file a lawsuit for interference with established community access rights. I was starting to feel the financial pressure Karen had intended. Even with a strong legal position, defending against a lawsuit would be expensive and time-consuming. But then something unexpected happened. I received an email from Doug Peterson with a subject line that simply read, "Evidence." Attached were dozens of financial documents from the HOA's accounts, showing large sums earmarked for beach maintenance, being diverted to a consulting company called KT Enterprises. A quick search revealed KT Enterprises was registered to Keith Thompson, Karen's husband. I forwarded everything to Grace, who called me immediately. "This is embezzlement," she said. "They'd been funneling HOA funds into their own company for years." "What should we do with this?" I asked. "First, we need to verify these documents. Then, if they're authentic, we take them to the police and the district attorney's office." Doug agreed to go on record confirming the documents' authenticity. 3 other board members, once shown the evidence, also came forward, admitting they'd suspected financial impropriety but had been afraid to challenge Karen's authority. Within a week, the county prosecutor's office opened an investigation into Karen and Keith Thompson for embezzlement and fraud. The investigation revealed they had misappropriated over $200,000 in HOA funds over the past 5 years. The day Karen was arrested outside the Clearwater Estates clubhouse was surprisingly anticlimactic. There were no dramatic protestations of innocence, just a stunned silence as she was escorted to a police cruiser, her perfectly styled hair falling out of place. The HOA board was reorganized under Doug's temporary leadership. One of their first actions was to send a formal apology to me, acknowledging my property rights and disavowing Karen's actions. 2 months later, Karen and Keith Thompson both pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for full restitution to the HOA. Part of their plea deal required them to sell their Clearwater Estates home and move out of the community. The day they moved, I stood on my private beach, watching the sunset over Lake Clearwater. Doug walked down from the public access point a quarter mile away and joined me at the water's edge. "Beautiful evening," he commented. "Perfect for a beach gathering." I nodded. "It is. The new board has been discussing ways to provide better community beach access," Doug said. "We're looking at purchasing a lakefront property that's up for sale on the other side of the cove." "That sounds like a good solution," I replied. Doug hesitated. "Some residents have asked me if you might consider allowing occasional community events on your beach, with proper notice, insurance, and compensation, of course. No pressure either way." I thought about it for a moment. "I might be open to that, for special occasions, not regular use. But it would have to be properly requested and approved each time." "That's more than fair," Doug said, smiling. "And it would be completely up to you, as the rightful property owner." We stood in companionable silence, watching the final rays of sunlight dance across the water. "You know," I said finally, "I moved here for the peace and quiet. I never wanted conflict." "Sometimes the right battles find us whether we want them or not," Doug replied. "But for what it's worth, you handled it with integrity. Most people would have caved under the pressure Karen applied. Military training teaches you to stand your ground when you're in the right, even when it's difficult. But it also teaches you the value of community and cooperation." The following summer, I hosted the first annual Lakeside Veterans Support Barbecue on my beach, inviting both veterans from the area and families from Clearwater Estates. It was a good day, children building sandcastles, neighbors chatting around grills, veterans sharing stories. As I watched people enjoying the beach, my beach, I realized something important. Ownership isn't just about having the right to exclude others. Sometimes it's about having the right to welcome them on your own terms. The security cameras that had once caught Karen's trespassing now captured only happy memories being made, proof that standing up for what's right can sometimes create something better than what you were defending in the first place. My private beach remained private, but now it was occasionally shared by invitation, a distinction Karen had never understood, but one that made all the difference.